Only blood relatives in this photo, my mother-in-law Amanda said, pushing me aside with her hand on my shoulder. Why don't you be useful and take the picture instead? I held the camera, watching as my husband James' family gathered on the grand staircase of their vacation home. This was supposed to be a happy reunion for Amanda's 60th birthday, but once again, I felt like an outsider even after being married to James for 5 years. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. I was used to Amanda's little ways of leaving me out, but this time felt different. Maybe it was because I had just found out some shocking news that morning, something I hadn't even told James yet. Or maybe I was just tired of trying. Mom, James said from the stairs, Olivia should be in the picture. She's family too. Amanda laughed, sharp and cold. Dear, these photos are for the family history book. We need to keep track of our bloodline. Olivia understands, don't you? I forced a smile, hiding how my hands were shaking. Of course, Amanda. Whatever you think is best. James looked like he wanted to argue, but I gave him a small shake of my head. Not now. We had bigger things to reveal later. As I took their picture, I thought about the DNA test results waiting in my email. I had taken the test months ago just to learn more about my family since my parents died when I was young. But the results had changed everything. Make sure you get everyone in the frame, Amanda said, fixing her blouse. And try not to shake the camera this time. Last year's pictures were blurry. They weren't blurry. I was a professional photographer, but Amanda always found a way to criticize me. Next to me, my sister-in-law Sophie rolled her eyes. She had married Amanda's nephew and knew exactly what I was going through. Perfect, I said after taking several photos. Would anyone like to check them? I'm sure they're fine, Amanda replied, already walking away. Now let's move to the garden. Blood relatives only, of course. As everyone left, James stayed behind. This is too much, he whispered, holding my hand. We should tell them now. Not yet, I said. Let's wait for dinner. It's her big night. James sighed and kissed my forehead. You're too kind to her, after everything she's done to you. I thought about all the small insults, the way she always introduced me as just James' wife, never by my name. 5 years of trying to fit into her family. The day dragged on with more blood relatives only pictures. Amanda was like a director, making sure everything was perfect. With each click of the camera, my secret felt heavier. Olivia, dear, Amanda called as we went inside for dinner. Since you're not in the photos, you must have plenty of energy left. Help in the kitchen, will you? I saw Sophie give me a sympathetic look as I followed Amanda. The kitchen was already filled with appetizers she had ordered. She would never actually cook for her own party. You can arrange these on plates, he said, barely looking at me. Make them look nice. And be careful with the crystal dishes. They're family heirlooms. Her words made me smile. If only she knew. What's so funny? Amanda asked sharply. Nothing, I said, placing the food on a tray. Just thinking about family heirlooms. She eyed me suspiciously. Yes, well, some things should stay in the family. Blood family, she said firmly. I stayed quiet, letting her words pass. Meanwhile, the DNA test results burned in my mind. James and I had even taken another test to be sure. We needed to be certain before tonight. As I finished, Amanda turned to me again. I've been meaning to talk to you. I sighed. She'd had many talks with me before. James is my only son, she said, pretending to sound kind. And while you've been fine as a wife, I do worry about the future, about our family legacy. The Morgan family name is very important to you, I said carefully. Exactly. She looked pleased. So you understand why these things matter. The photos, the family history, the bloodline. It all must be preserved properly. I thought again about the DNA results. About the truth Amanda didn't know yet. Of course, I said softly. Blood is everything, isn't it? She smiled, thinking I agreed with her. I'm glad you understand. Now let's bring these out to the real family. As she walked out, her perfect hair in place, I couldn't help but smile. In just a few hours, during her birthday dinner, her world of blood relatives only was about to collapse. I picked up a platter, remembering the moment James and I first saw the results. The shock, the laughter, the irony of it all. Sophie peeked into the kitchen. Need help? I can't listen to Amanda's history lesson anymore. Thanks, I said, handing her a tray. Just wait until dinner. The family history is about to get very interesting. The dining room buzzed as everyone found their seats. Amanda, of course, had arranged it so I was far from the core family. I sat at the end of the table next to Suffy and a distant cousin, because even distant blood relatives mattered more to Amanda than a spouse like me. James caught my eye from his seat near his mother and gave me a quick wink. My stomach flipped. The DNA test results were ready on our phones, waiting for the perfect moment. Amanda tapped her wine glass. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about family. Sophie leaned over. $10 says she mentions bloodlines in the first sentence. 20 says it's in the first 5 words, I whispered back. Our precious family bloodline, Amanda began. Sophie sighed, slid a 20 under the table, and tried not to laugh. Amanda went on about the importance of the Morgan name, how their family had produced doctors, lawyers, and even a senator. James fidgeted, hand near his phone. I shook my head slightly, not yet. Let her finish. And while we welcome those who marry into our family, Amanda said, barely glancing at me, we must always remember that true bonds come from blood. The first course arrived, giving me a moment to breathe. Amanda continued sharing stories about her perfect family, reminding everyone that she was still collecting photos for the new family history book. Blood relatives only, of course, she added. That was our cue. James cleared his throat. Speaking of family history, Mom, Olivia, and I have something to share. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Oh, are you finally giving me a grandchild? Not exactly, James said, pulling out his phone. Olivia took a DNA test a few months ago. The results were interesting. The room fell silent. Amanda tightened her grip on her wine glass. I don't see how Olivia's DNA has anything to do with our family history. That's where you're wrong, Mom. James stood behind my chair. Show them, honey. I pulled up the email and handed my phone to Sophie. She gasped as she read it. No way, she whispered, looking between me and Amanda. Amanda frowned. What is it? I took a deep breath. According to the DNA test, I'm related to the Morgan family. Directly related. Amanda's face turned pale. That's impossible. Not impossible, James said. Olivia's grandfather, her mom's dad, was a Morgan, your father's brother, the one who disappeared in the 60s. Amanda's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. No one moved. That can't be, she stammered. Uncle Thomas died young. He never had kids. Actually, I said gently, he changed his name and started a new life. He had a daughter, my mom. Which means you and my mom are first cousins, and James and I are second cousins. The room was silent. Around the table, people looked shocked, amused, or unsure what to say. Sophie kept scrolling through the results, her mouth open. We even took a second test to be sure, James added. It's confirmed. Olivia has more Morgan blood than half the people in your pictures today, Mom. Amanda sat frozen. For years, she had treated me like I didn't belong because I wasn't real family, but by her own rules, I was. Sophie finally broke the silence. Well, this definitely needs to go in a family history book. A few people chuckled. Amanda just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The woman who had spent years treating me like an outsider was, in the end, my aunt. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of whispered conversations and shocked glances. Amanda barely touched her food, her perfect posture slumping slightly as she processed the news. I watched as she periodically shook her head, as if trying to deny the reality before her. After dessert, while others cleared the table, Amanda disappeared into her study. James wanted to follow her, but I stopped him. Let me, I said softly. We need to have this conversation. I found her sitting at her desk, staring at an old photograph. As I approached, I recognized it. A young man in a military uniform, smiling broadly at the camera. That's him, isn't it? I asked quietly. Thomas Morgan. My grandfather. Amanda nodded slowly. He was my favorite uncle. When he disappeared, everyone assumed. We never knew. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. You have his smile. How did I never notice? I sat down in the chair across from her desk. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? All these years, she whispered, all those things I said about blood relatives, about family legacy. She covered her face with her hands. I've been horrible to you. Yes, you have, I agreed calmly. But now we have a choice. We can either let this revelation tear us further apart, or we can use it to build something new. She lowered her hands, revealing mascara-streaked cheeks. How can you even want to build anything with me after how I've treated you? I reached into my purse and pulled out another document, not a DNA test this time, but a photograph. This is my mom, I said, sliding it across the desk. Your cousin. She died when I was 12, but she always told me that family was about love, not blood. Ironically, it turns out I had both with the Morgans all along. Amanda picked up the photo, her hand trembling. She looks just like Aunt Sarah, she murmured. Thomas's wife. I have more photos, I offered. And stories, if he'd like to hear them. We could add them to the family history book, all of them, not just the blood relatives. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I'd like that. She paused, then added, I have so much to make up for. Yes, you do, I agreed. But we have time. And now that we know we're family, by blood and by marriage, maybe we can start fresh. The next morning, Amanda called everyone together for another family photo. This time, she positioned me right next to her, in the center of the group. Everyone in, she announced, her voice carrying a new warmth. Blood relatives, spouses, partners, every single person who makes this family whole. Sophie grinned as she set up the camera timer and rushed to join us. No blurry photos this time? Your photos were never blurry, Amanda admitted, surprising everyone. I was just being difficult. You're actually quite talented, Olivia. As the camera flashed, capturing the moment, I felt James squeeze my hand. In that fraction of a second, everything had changed. The walls of exclusion had crumbled, replaced by bridges of understanding. Later, as we helped Amanda organize photos for the family history book, she paused over a picture of James and me on our wedding day. You know, she said thoughtfully, maybe it's time to redefine what we mean by family legacy. I watched as she opened to a fresh page in the book, carefully placing the photo of my grandfather Thomas alongside pictures of his long-lost family. Below it she wrote, family is not just in our blood. It's in our hearts, our choices, and sometimes in the most unexpected discoveries. The Morgan family legacy hadn't been diminished by including everyone. It had been enriched. And somewhere, I like to think my mother and grandfather were smiling at how their family had finally come full circle. As we closed the family history book, now filled with all our stories, Amanda hugged me for the first time in 5 years. Welcome home, she whispered. For real this time. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the strongest family bonds are forged not just by blood, but by the willingness to open our hearts to new possibilities and to find family in places we never expected to look.